Me?
That's the one.
What the fuck?
Do you know
He was my best mate growing up.
You're kidding!
Fame is supposed to change everything. The houses, the cars, the circles, the way strangers look at you when you walk into a room. And for most of these people, it did. But every once in a while, the past comes knocking. An old face appears in a backstage hallway in a crowd.
I knew you when you were a baby.
Or on the other end of a phone call nobody expected. And what happens in that moment reveals more about who these people really are than any interview, any album, or any red carpet ever could. These are 7 of the most powerful and unforgettable moments when celebrities and rock stars came face to face with someone from their life before all of this. Story 1. Ed Sheeran.
I found a love for me.
Before the Grammys, before the stadium tours, before his face was on every streaming platform simultaneously, Ed Sheeran was a teenager in Framlingham, Suffolk, playing guitar at open mic nights to rooms that were barely half full. He had moved there from Halifax at age 4 and considered it home. When he returned after breaking through, globally, what struck the people who knew him then was not the fame. It was that he had not recalibrated who he was around the people who remembered the earlier version of him.
I went to primary school.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So did we know each other?
Yeah.
Did we?
Former classmates who expected awkwardness found none. Old friends who braced for distance found him exactly where they had left him.
James.
Yes.
Me?
That's the one.
What the fuck?
Do you
He
know
was my best mate growing up.
In a world where fame almost always rewrites a person's relationship with their own past, Sheeran seemed genuinely unbothered by the gap between who he was and who he had become.
I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart...
Story 2. Eminem. Eminem's path to fame is well documented. The poverty, the years of rejection before the Slim Shady LP changed everything in February 1999. What is less discussed is what happened to the people from that world once the money arrived. Eminem has spoken across multiple decades of interviews about the experience of watching certain people from his past reappear the moment his name meant something. People who had been absent during the years of struggle showed up with familiarity and expectation, as if the distance were simply a scheduling issue.
Old restaurant where I used to work as a short order cook, and people flipped out.
What, me and Pete? Oh, what up, man? How you doing? Good to see you, man.
He learned to read those moments quickly. He drew a line that protected the handful of people who had been present before anyone was celebrating. When his friend Proof was killed on April 11, 2006, Eminem spoke publicly about losing the one person who had known him before the mythology was built.
Proof. That's how Proof was to me. Yeah, man, he was a godsend to me because I know that I would not have made it without knowing him.
The grief in those words was not performative. It was the grief of someone who understood exactly how rare that kind of witness is.
And if the mockingbird don't sing and the rain don't shine, I'ma break that birdie's neck. I go back to...
Story 3. Bruce Springsteen and Clarence Clemens.
Romeo and Juliet. Samson and Delilah.
Bruce Springsteen has built a career on the mythology of New Jersey. So when he reconnected publicly with people from his early days in Asbury Park, the moments carried weight precisely because they weren't manufactured. Clarence Clemens, the saxophonist who joined Springsteen's E Street Band in the early 1970s, after walking into a bar during a rainstorm and asking to sit in, remained one of Springsteen's closest relationships for 4 decades. Springsteen has described that first night in interviews with a level of detail that only exists when a memory has been replayed thousands of times. When Clemens died on June 18, 2011, the tribute Springsteen delivered wasn't the tribute of a bandleader losing a colleague. It was a man losing the person who had been there at the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted.
We told a story of
the possibilities of friendship. A story older than the ones that I was writing, and a story that I could never have told without him at my side. I want to thank you, big man. I love you so much.
Story 4. Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl has a reputation in the music industry that is almost anomalous. It's universally liked, conspicuously grounded, and genuinely connected to people from every stage of his career. He grew up in Springfield, Virginia, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and it was an unplanned encounter years after the peak of Nirvana that stood out most to him. He ran into a former schoolmate from those Virginia years he hadn't seen since before his life in music had started. By his own account, the conversation lasted hours. What he described afterward wasn't nostalgia. It was the strange and specific experience of being seen by someone whose mental image of you was formed before any of the defining events of your adult life had happened. He talked about it the way people talk about looking at old photographs. The recognition is real, but the person in the frame feels like someone else entirely. Story 5. Johnny Depp.
You will always remember this as the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow.
Johnny Depp has spoken at length about his upbringing in Owensboro, Kentucky, and later Miramar, Florida, where his family moved in 1970, and about the instability that defined much of his early life before acting gave him a foothold. What makes one particular reunion stand out is the context around it. Years into his career, Depp encountered someone from a formative period of his adolescence who had been present during some of the most difficult chapters of his life before Hollywood existed as a possibility. By his own account, the meeting was disorienting in a specific way. The person remembered a version of events that Depp had either reframed or filed away entirely. Two people, the same shared history, two completely different stories about what happened. He has described moments like that as the reason he keeps a small and deliberately unchanged circle of people around him.
The Black Pearl is gone. Unless you have a rudder and a lot of sails hidden in that bodice. Unlikely.
Story 6. Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's relationship with her own past is more documented than almost any artist of her generation simply because she began processing it in songs before she was old enough to fully understand the experiences she was describing. A reunion with a former close friend that happened quietly and without press was something she referenced in interviews as one of the more clarifying moments of her adult life. The friend had drifted during the years when Swift's fame made ordinary friendship logistically complicated. When they reconnected, what Swift took from it wasn't warmth or resolution. It was clarity about what the distance had revealed. She has said in multiple interviews that fame doesn't create the fractures in relationships. It just accelerates the ones that were already there. That line is worth sitting with for a moment. Story 7. Adele. Adele was born in Tottenham in North London but moved to South London at age 9. And it was those South London friendships that she has spoken about most honestly across her career. She has credited a small group of women from that chapter of her life with keeping her grounded through a period of commercial success that would have been genuinely destabilizing for anyone.
I'm 10 and Ruby is 8.
Where do you come from?
England, in London.
Oh my God, no way! I knew you when you were a baby! I knew her when she was a baby! Oh my God, shut up! No way! Oh my God! Oh my God, sorry, this freaked me out, sorry. Her mum plays for me, she's back there, she plays cello. You were like 2 weeks old when I first met you, oh my God!
What makes her story different from others on this list is the deliberateness of it. She didn't leave those friendships to chance. She actively maintained them across years of touring, public breakdowns, and global scrutiny. When she spoke about them during her major 2021 interviews, the emotion wasn't retrospective. These were not relationships she was looking back on. They were relationships she was actively living inside.
Let me photograph you in this light in case it is the last time that we might.
There is a pattern that runs through almost every story on this list. The person who returns from the past not with warmth or curiosity, but with expectation. The old friend who watched someone become famous and recalibrated the entire history of their relationship to justify a claim on the present. It happens to almost every person on this list in some form. The early collaborator who showed up at a management meeting, the school contact who called after a decade of silence, the neighbor who became a tabloid source. What unites every story above is that the people who stayed real had one thing in common. They were present during the years when staying was an inconvenience rather than an advantage. Fame sorted them from everyone else without anyone having to ask.